Hello, it's Allison Schaefer here, and welcome. We're doing another Facebook Live this evening. We're starting at 7 o'clock, but I wanted to jump on early to make sure that there is a face to greet you as you're getting yourself in and settled, getting the kids settled, or maybe having the teens and tweens come join you to hear this important conversation. We're going to be talking about how to set appropriate limits and boundaries with that age group, which can prove a challenge. So we'll wait till our proper 7 o'clock start, and I'll give you a little bit of an overview of how our event's going to go again tonight. So again, welcome and thank you for joining us. And how are you doing? I have to say, it's I have a great care and concern for my families right now. As you know, I have a private practice, so I get to hear a little bit of insights into what's going on in people's homes, and I know people are really, really challenged. So we're going to be here to help, give you all the support we can, and of course, besides our presentation that I'll go over, we do have this wonderful opportunity to engage and chat and talk. So while we're waiting for the rest of us to gather here and start officially, would you please let me know, where are you watching from? It would be really wonderful to get full province representation tonight. So let me know where you're watching from and the ages of your kids. And it would be really helpful to know, what's your big challenge right now? What's going on in your family life that you could really use some support? And we take that information. I'll answer all the Q&A. I'll try to get through a bunch tonight, but if I need extra time, I'll type back and make sure I get to everybody. But it would be really helpful to know what you're up against, because that does help us shape our content for other events and also for my newsletters and blogs and things. So it's important for me to hear from you. This is our time together to give as much help as possible to our families in our series. So again, for you who have been participating at these, we've been having events like this now for several years. So for you loyalists, welcome back. Thanks for all the support. There's always something new to learn, a little inspiration to keep us going. And for people that are just tuning in for the first time, hello and thank you. And I'm so glad that you're here. Let us know, where are you watching from and how old are your kids? What's your big burning concern? We're going to queue up all those questions during our Q&A, and we'll get to those at the end of our presentation. And just so you know, and I'm going to go over this with everybody when we get the final 7 o'clock go, for those people who comment and ask questions and engage, your name is going to be entered into a draw for a $250 Visa gift card. So there you go. We're also going to have an opportunity for people to complete a survey after watching our presentation, just to let us know what you learned and if we're being effective. And for those first 200 people that fill out that survey, I have a thank you of a $5 Tim Hortons gift card as well. So lots to look forward to, besides some great content and some community here tonight. So welcome, welcome. I will assume that we're at the top of the hour, do you think, Catherine, and people are good to go? All right, so this will be my official welcome. My name is Allison Schaefer. I'm a parent educator and a family counselor. And this is called our hashtag Family Talk series. This is the second that we've been doing. We're going to do more over the summer. So it's okay if you missed the last one. All of these videos are archived on my YouTube channel. You don't need to watch them in order. They're all kind of standalone. But of course, if you do make it through more content, you're going to have just that much more knowledge and tools and skills. And that's really what this program is about, that we are here to help empower parents so that they have the proper parenting techniques and the tools, the confidence and the skills in order for them to raise healthy, happy adults, and to do so in a way that prevents them from underage drinking. So that's really what we're about. We've been doing this for quite a few years now. And what's wonderful is that no matter where you are in your parenting journey or whatever issues you brought, you're going to learn something that is going to be helpful for helping you raise your teens. The information is applicable to so many situations. And every night we have a different specific topic. Tonight we're going to be talking about how do we set and enforce boundaries. And I think that has come up for parents quite a bit since we are now in this COVID season of the pandemic that is adding new challenges, new concerns, new worries for parents. And parenting teens was already a difficult enough task. This whole other layer has been just that much more stressful. And so I want to talk about that because now we're seeing this unique phase that as we are starting to open up, our kids are no longer in lockdown under our homes. They're starting to venture out, which they need to do. We don't want our kids to be isolated. They need to be with their friends. But now we have the worry about how they're going to conduct themselves when we're not there to supervise, when we're not there looking over their shoulders to remind, when we're not there to watch their health protocols. And so, we're worried. Parents are worried. Are people wearing their masks? Are people keeping their 6 feet social distancing? Are they following all those good health protocols when we're not there to supervise? So that is of concern for us. That setting those limits and watching health behaviors is a lot of what our #FamilyTalk program has been about already. Making good choices when there isn't a parent overlooking your shoulder. How do we get kids to say no to underage drinking when we aren't there supervising their parties? So there's a parallel that we're going to talk about tonight. Now, I'd really like to know where you're watching from, the ages of your kids, to please use that forum that we have for posting questions, because for one lucky person, your name will be drawn and you'll be getting a $250 Visa gift card as a thank you for your question. And for everybody who is watching, at the end of this presentation, and before we go to Q&A, we'll post a link, and that link is to a survey. That survey is really important to me. It's about what you've learned from the presentation that we've just seen. We want to make sure that we're being effective in bringing you the best information that we can. And so it's just a few short questions, no longer than 5 minutes. And to thank you for watching and for helping us out with that survey, I have a $5 Tim Hortons gift card as well. So 2 opportunities to get a little cash in your pocket during difficult times. So let's begin then with this idea of healthy boundaries and good choices for our teens, and whether those good choices around the healthy decisions of social distancing protocols or whether those are around the good safety of not underage drinking. We're going to look at those 2 parallels. And the first step in setting those good boundaries, establishing and reinforcing those boundaries, is we always want to start with education. We need to educate our kids about why we're setting these limits and boundaries. They need to understand the logic. Kids don't like it when rules are just arbitrarily placed upon them for no reason from down on high. So that whole idea of just do it because I say so, which was a parenting mentality of years gone by, it's just not going to cut it with kids today. That our kids today really are not willing to simply bow to us in that same way. So we're really in a very different situation, that we can't rely on simply trying to force our kids' compliance to rules that we have created and expect them to follow them. That in fact, when we do that approach, what we have seen is that tends to lead to 2 kinds of behaviors. We either get kids who start sneaking around, so they're saying, sure, I'll wear the mask, yeah, I stayed away. And so they will sneak and lie and carry on the way that they want to, and we really weren't impactful in establishing, keeping that boundary or changing their choices away from us. So they're either going to be sneaky about it, or they're just going to outwardly rebel against us. And so we're not getting the end result that we want. Instead, we got to shake this up and go about it in a different way. What we're trying to do is to help our kids have a feeling that they would actually be intrinsically motivated and truly willing to be cooperative because they have an understanding. And so there's a wanting to make these choices. And that is a very different approach, and it requires very different parenting approaches. And so we know that when we're trying to win kids' cooperation rather than forcing their compliance, we really have to work on that relationship and getting them to understand what we're thinking, so that when we are close, when we have been open in our communication, we are much more likely to influence our children's decisions for themselves because they trust us as respected leaders and because they want to make good on living up to the example and the high expectations that we hold for them. So let's talk about the information that needs to get out there. I am sure that you have probably spent some time talking to your kids about the pandemic. If you haven't, if anything, we're oversaturated with some of the information, but for sure, I think most of us have covered off why we need to keep the 6 feet apart, how the germ is spread, but maybe there's a piece that's still missing about the fact that many teenagers still feel that because they are asymptomatic, that they might fall into a different category, and they think that if misunderstandingly thinking that if they're not at harm, that they don't have to pay attention to these rules. We need to correct that misconception and have them understand that because we're worried about community spread, that while they themselves may not develop the symptomatology, they are still part of the solution for the overall pandemic, and that we need their help in this. And so that's the part that I think is really important to get across. Or as my father used to say, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So we want to get them to understand that in truth, their choices that they're making about their behaviors out in the community really do have a significant importance to how this whole thing is going to move. We want to think of others, not just of ourselves. So I hope you've covered off that conversation. So now let's talk again, paralleling these two. What is the educative pieces that our kids still need to know about underage drinking? Have you had that conversation? Well, there's many parents who have not yet, and part of why they have not approached this topic is because either one, they have this understanding that, you know what, kids are going to drink anyways, I'm not going to be able to stop them, and they feel powerless to make a difference. They feel powerless in that what they might do could have a change. And I want parents to hear, in fact, you really do matter. You really matter in this program. Because what we know is that when we look at the research, it is parental attitudes, behaviors that really shape the decision making of the child. So when you can actually follow the steps of the program and follow our parenting advice, what we find is that that powerful piece of the parental influence is the number one determinant over whether kids decide to drink or not, even more than peer pressure. So, in fact, you are important, and I want to show you how to go through those steps. Now, the second reason that you might not have had to talk about the dangers of underage drinking is perhaps you don't know them. A lot of us were of the age where we didn't know what we know now, and so a lot of us thought, you know, I drank, I turned out fine, I don't really see the dangers or the negative consequences. But we have a lot of research now that maybe hasn't made its way to you that you do need to know about, and so that you can pass on to your kids just the same way that we're going to pass on good information about the pandemic. Let's pass on health information about the dangers and the risks associated with underage drinking. And that is to know that now we understand that the brain of a youth is different than the brain of an adult. They are different, and that during our adolescent years, the brain goes through this incredible process that allows it to completely rewire, this period of neuroplasticity, which is just fascinating. But it also means that it's vulnerable. It is more susceptible to environmental impacts in the shaping of its structures. And that brain is actually able to wire our synapses, neural connections, faster, stronger, and longer. So environmental influence is particularly important at this time in development. Now, the other thing is that youth are going through puberty, which means we're having not only neurochemical changes, but also hormonal changes. And what happens with those changes is that it creates a propensity for wanting to seek out thrill-seeking behavior. So here's the dilemma, folks. You've got this brain that wants to seek thrills at the same time as the parts of the brain that are responsible for decision-making, planning, executive functioning, that smart stuff, is still in lag time. So high risk, low thinking, problem-solving abilities, then you add alcohol to that combination, this becomes a recipe for a disaster for our kids. So if we're gonna have them be safe and healthy, to have better long-term outcomes for our kids as they transition into adulthood out of this particularly vulnerable time, we really need to explain to them the health reasons and the dangers and why they need to say no to alcohol. So there's the education piece that we need to have with our kids, both about the pandemic and both about alcohol drinking. So that's one in setting our limits and boundaries, which is our discussion tonight. And again, are people typing in and saying where they're writing from? People putting comments? Oh, did I get all? I'm looking for all provinces. Okay, wonderful. So you've got the education piece. Moving on to step two then. We then have to talk about modeling. And I know we talked a little bit about this in our last program, but this is about limits and boundaries. So I want you to think about how we are actually conducting ourselves that our kids might be seeing around the pandemic. Are you wearing one of these every single time? Or are you like, you know what, I left it in the car, I'm just running into the gas station to buy a pack of gum, I'll just be in and out. Are we walking the talk? That if we always wear a mask, if we're always washing our hands, if we are consistent in following the health standard and regulations, we're more likely, and again, notice more likely, to get our kids to also see that we're taking it seriously, and they're more likely to follow in their footsteps when they're making choices for themselves, if that's what they're always seeing. So again, making this parallel. When we model responsible drinking to our kids and we drink within the health and safety guidelines, our kids are more likely to follow in that pattern too. Now, as minors, the health and safety guidelines are none. For us, because we're adults and our brain is in a different place, we have different protocols. So just because you are drinking and your kids are not, you are not being a hypocrite. Which brings me to my third point, which is kids actually can handle that there are different rules. Different rules are okay, so long as they're enforced consistently. So let's talk about that a little bit more. How do we get this consistency? What does that mean? Well, let's think about this if I'm using the metaphor of sports, for example. When you play a sporting game, you're basically making up rules, but everybody has an agreement on how the rules are going to be, and so long as everybody follows the rules of the game, everybody has a good time. You might have a rule in the game that somebody in one position on the team is allowed to run the full length of the field, but a different position on the team is only allowed to run through a certain portion. That's fine. Different rules, different positions, but everybody agrees. What becomes difficult for kids is when we don't enforce the rules. So now you have a referee who just on a whim decides that he's not going to play foul when somebody goes on a part of the field they're not allowed to go. Now suddenly it feels like things are arbitrary, that things are not being fair, that somebody has been given advantage and somebody else disadvantage. It feels like the authority of the referee in this situation is now under consideration. And in fact, if we don't follow those rules, this game now becomes a bit of a sham. That in fact, when we want to really clearly chalk the boundaries, making them seen, that's when kids have a much easier time at understanding rules. Clear, concise, and consistently enforced holds you up as authority and gives them better likelihood of being able to navigate around those expectations that you have of them to say no to alcohol. So let's again compare this to the pandemic. When we were in stage 1, the rules were really clear and concise. We were in full lockdown. Stay home, don't go out. People seem to be able to do that. What became more confusing to the rules and boundaries is actually as we started to go into stage 2 and stage 3. Now people started to get a little confused. Why here? Why there? Why swimming pools but not golf club? The confusion of the rules and the lack of understanding from the education of how those rules were created made people start to question them. And when they started to question them, we started to see people getting angry and we started to see people not complying. And I'm not just talking teens and tweens, I'm talking adults. These are the same principles of human nature. So we really want to rely on that clear, concise, consistently enforced rule and limit in your family. And I bring that up because it's a tendency of parents to want to make exceptions to the rules, especially around drinking, where we might say, you know, the poor kids, they're locked up with COVID, they're not allowed to see their friends, the school year seems a mess, they didn't get grad, and suddenly we start feeling a certain amount of pity, and we want to perk them up. And so, you know, we're with the neighbors in the backyard, why don't you have a beer? The problem with that is you have now just punctured a hole in your firm boundary, and it is not as strong as it was before. So think about that. Now you got a kid who's going out to a party and you just happen to notice some lumps in their knapsack. And so you go, hey, you do a little investigation. You find out that your minor is sneaking out with a 6-pack. And you're like, whoa, you know the family rules. We're not allowed to drink. You're a minor. You're underage. Well, now think about it from the mind of the child. I don't get it. Is it okay if I drink or not? I just had one in the backyard barbecue. Do you like it or don't you like it? Are you just deciding when and when not? And now you're trying to control me, and now it's getting arbitrary. And so suddenly now we're again eroding that strong leadership that we had. So it is much easier to keep that clear and consistent rule if you want to help constrain our children's behavior. So there's still going to be some issues, so I want to talk about some of the challenges that come up with parents around this. The first one is, again, about the consistency piece. I know that from 20 years of working with families, anything that you ask parents to do consistently can be really hard because we're busy. I think you're going to find that you are going to be stronger if you position this thinking for yourself and how you explain it to your kids around your value system. Because we tend to be much more consistent when we are talking about our value base. And so think about that in terms of some other values that you might have. Would you let your child occasionally cheat on a test and say it's okay? Probably not. Would you let your child occasionally tell an inappropriate joke that would offend somebody? Probably not. These are going off your values. So if you can set yourself in your value and explain that the reason why we're saying no, not only for health reasons, but this is actually an illegal act in our country to drink as a minor. And so we're law-abiding citizens, and that becomes a value. We don't break laws, and we expect you to, just the same as we expect you to follow the health protocols for social distancing and all those safety protocols, be a good citizen to help eradicate the pandemic. We expect you also to be a law-abiding citizen and to conduct yourself and to be able to say no to alcohol. We have faith in you to do that, because kids will actually move in line with your expectations. If you show them, if you educate them and you set the boundary, right? And then you say that I have great expectations, that now that we've had this discussion and you see clearly on this, that I have every expectation that you're going to make good choices for yourself. So it's always our job then to have that faith in our kids and to send them out into the world rather than to keep them inside and show no faith and protect them. We can't. We have to be able to prepare them to go out into life. They're going back to school. They have to go. They have to grow up. They have to grow their wings. And that's part of the process. So I know the consistency is a hard piece, so hopefully the value part will help. The second thing that really seems to be hard for parents is they have a feeling that when they're going to set a boundary, that they're going to create some friction and that it's going to hurt the relationship. And this is really not the case. That if we continue, watch all the videos, we talk about it over the course of different ones. When we have that strong relationship with our kids and we have good, strong leadership, with a healthy relationship, you can be both firm, establishing your limits and boundaries, but you can also do it in a friendly way. So maybe you want to think about it as when they were little and they wanted to have, cotton candy for breakfast, you probably lovingly were firm and said, cotton candy is not for breakfast. I love you too much to give you cotton candy, right? And yeah, did they whine? Did they complain? Were they disappointed they didn't get it? Yeah, but that was you showing loving concern. And they did still love you, and it didn't shred the relationship. And the same is true today. That yes, they might moan, and you might hear a little pushback, because that's what teenagers do. But if you can do it with the same loving concern for their development, for their health and their safety, for their brain development into adulthood, you can say it with that same care and concern, and it will not shred your relationship to be a firm and friendly leader. So we just want to recap a few things here. So we're going to educate our kids. We are then going to be clear and concise in establishing our boundaries and making sure that we're consistent in testing them. So you got all that part down pat. Now here's the part you also got to remember. Our job is to set boundaries and limits. It's a kid's job to find them by testing them. And that is when your kids test the boundaries, when they step over the line, when your kid comes home intoxicated, you got to call foul as the referee. You do. You don't move the boundary, you call foul. So, but don't think that it's because you have a bad kid. Don't think that it's because, what happened? I set these firm limits and boundaries. It was supposed to prevent all this. It's not how the process goes. The process goes in testing, trial and error, and understanding how to respond effectively to mistakes is a really important part of helping our kids make good choices for themselves in the future. So again, think about this if we're talking about COVID. Do you want to give your child the expectation that they're going to conduct themselves properly, do all the social distancing, but then if they're afraid of you and they don't want to tell you that they actually went out and kissed their girlfriend, and then they come back and because they are trying to not get in trouble with you, they don't tell you, we now have a cascading problem where perhaps they pass on the virus and now grandma and grandpa get sick, and something that was a small problem that the child made a bad decision because they didn't seek out the help of their parents and didn't come forward, things went from bad to worse. So all our kids are going to make a bad decision. Good people make occasional bad decisions, but they need to know that if they come to you, that with our help, we can minimize instead of making making a bad mistake worse. So I want my kids to know that if you are intoxicated, I don't want you to hide that from me and then get a ride with somebody else because you were too afraid to let me know that you needed to get picked up or that the party went off the rails. So I want to constantly reinforce that I can only be a help on the journey and minimize those mistakes if you call upon me for help in those moments. But mistakes will be made. It's how we respond and recover, and that they're teaching opportunities. So what will we do next? How can we do we need to have your girlfriend come into the bubble so that you can see her? let's talk to her family and see if that's okay. We need to make arrangements. Maybe it's like, oh, okay, thanks for telling me. You need 14 days somewhere else. Let's figure it out. And the same with talking to our kids about what happened at the party. Why was that so difficult? Let's take this as a learning opportunity. Have you found a good way to maneuver situations where you might be feeling peer pressure, where you might be feeling the pressure that it's uncomfortable to say no? Then let's help you find a different way to say it. What feels good to you? If you can't say, no, it's just not my jam, I want to follow my parents' rules. Maybe kids don't want to say that, but maybe they'd feel more comfortable saying things like, no, you know what, I got this ADHD medication that's going to really mess me up. Or, you know what, I have not been sleeping well. Have you been sleeping well since this whole pandemic? That's just going to mess with my sleep. I got too much going on. don't want to add that. Or, what's a low carb? No way, man. I'm ketoing. I can't do beer. I'm just tossing out ideas. It's about you being creative with your child to come up with something that feels really just comfortable for them so that they can navigate that situation. It's not enough to say, just say no. How do you say no? And so same with your kids in the COVID situation. What are you gonna do when you arrive and your buddy starts coming up to give you the bro hug and you haven't seen him since school was out? Have you thought about rehearse? Because that brain does not think good in the minute. That's not its strength at this age while it is rewiring. So having these rehearsals of scenarios in advance is part of what helps kids navigate those situations. And yeah, they're gonna flop, they're gonna have oopsies, but if we know about it, we can help them prepare for the next encounter so that it's more successful for them. So it's not a failure, it's not bad character, it's part of the process, it's about learning. And that every time you do that reset, good, glad we talked about it. Yes, you can go out to the next party. I trust you to say no to alcohol, you've got this thing figured out. You gotta keep restoring that faith and trust, because when kids feel that we have that good expectation, that's the drawing factor in their decision making towards keeping in good standing with you. When we expect them to fail, they go, well, I'm already painted guilty anyways, I might as well do the crime. So we're going in the opposite direction that we're trying to achieve. So here's my last point, and then we're going to turn it to questions and answers. This is a tip more than about setting limits and boundaries. This is really about something more proactive. We have the whole month of August still ahead of us. It has been a long time that we have had our kids in all the activities and all the normal busyness of their lives. And what we know is that one of the number one reasons kids indicate that they decided to drink was out of boredom. So as much as I am one that believes that boredom is great for the creative spark and that's an important part of the process, that's not to say that we can't guide our kids or help structure their day such that they're filling their time with meaningful, fun, engaging activity that is alcohol-free. Because the more that they are having a full day of, and whatever that might be, learning a new skill, creating a podcast, learning how to make a longboard, find out what your kids are really into, and when they tap into it, they'll get all into it, and they're not going to have all this wandering free time where they're likely to get into some mischief. So if that helps you get through the last few weeks as we send them off into the world, whether that's them making good choices and following the protocols for safe behavior, whether that's COVID pandemic related, or whether they're out on their own and making good self safe and healthy choices around protecting their brains and the negative consequences of introducing alcohol during those formative times. It's hopefully you'll see the parallels between our approaches on both of those, and that this has been helpful. Please share this with your friends. If you'd like to join in the next one, I have a subscription to my e-newsletter on my website so that we can send you out any notices when the next one's coming up, which is shortly. Share on your book. Join my Facebook teen group if you'd like. Lots of people will be talking about this after, and I try to get in there daily to comment and see what parents are chatting about as well. And there's a link to that survey. Honestly, I'm so appreciative. If you do it, it means a lot to me. It's your thank you back for our time here today, and my thank you to you to spend the minutes to do the survey. There's a $5 Tim Hortons gift card. So that's it for tonight. Thank you again. Stay well. Happy parenting. See you next time.